create opportunities and create an inclusive community where no one is left behind. And one of the, he mentioned places like the US where 3D printing is available for amputees. And that's something that can also be done in the Gambia, that has the potential to happen here. He also mentioned that Gambia needs to take advantage and start capacity building, which is to enable the technology, sustainable technology here, and by building infrastructure and enabling innovation. And then the third one, Africa has a thriving market for the youth, and they have to take advantage to compete also in the digital revolution. Also mentioning printing less money for electronic measures. It mentioned that businesses will run easily and efficiently when it is done online. So, but in order to get there, Gambia needs to do the basic infrastructure in place, which is having the access to the internet. The internet, again, has to be affordable, reliable, and the two key players will be the private sector and young people. So, okay. And finally, the last one from ITAG again, talking about students, that it's important for students to have internet online so they can have online education. Basically, being able to participate online will help improve student learning, especially in agriculture and healthcare students. For example, healthcare students can easily collect patient data. It mentioned that the internet is a powerful and tool that Gambians need to really take advantage of.
Hello. I was the rapporteur for the first session, which was the internet ecosystem in the Gambia, infrastructure, access, affordability, and inclusion. So the first speaker we had was Lamin Jabi from the Gambia Submarine Cable. And he said, since the arrival of the cable, that there has been an efficient infrastructure, reduced cost, and better service with the internet in the Gambia. He also said that the GSC is owned by ISPs and the government. The ISPs own 51% and the government owns the other 49%. He also said that they are part of the ACE consortium. And the issues they face are that with cost, they spend almost $500,000 every 2 weeks on power and gas. They also have a problem accessing the national backbone, which is owned by Gamtel. He also mentioned that we need to generate local content to use all the capacity that we have, and that there's a skills gap when it comes to finding staff to work for them. That they don't have, that it is difficult to find people that are skilled enough to do the job. And they also have problems when it comes to transitioning to IPv6. Matar Toure from Pura mentioned that we're using less than a quarter of our internet capacity, and he spoke more about the Gambia Submarine Cable's role and elaborated on the points that Jabi made. He said that ISPs complain about Gamtel being the national backbone as well as an internet service provider, and that makes them an unfair competition. He also said that the cost of internet is much lower than it was, and it should go down more before the end of the year. We then had Mohammed Fai from the Serekunda Internet Exchange Point. It was founded in July 2013, and their main objective is to operate an internet exchange point and other internet-related infrastructure for service providers and internet users. They're supposed to host content, but due to the fact that there is almost no local content, most of the content that they host is international, such as Facebook and Google. And they're currently working on upgrading their infrastructure. We also had Momodu Ali Jallo from Moisi, who said that they're currently looking into the high cost of internet. He explained that the Gambian government mainly relies on taxes, which in turn contribute to the high cost of internet. He also mentioned that the cost of internet governance is very high. Lamin Dabo from the National Youth Council said that Gambians are still struggling with internet access, and we should compare ourselves to other countries to be able to gauge our progress. He also said that end users are not satisfied with the level of internet governance in the country. He commended the Youth IGF, which happened on Wednesday, and encouraged the youth to utilize the knowledge that they gained and ask questions, as it is very important to get more young people active in our internet ecosystem. He also said that internet infrastructure upcountry is still very low and that there is a very low penetration rate. He stressed that internet service providers need to find a way to serve all citizens. We had 2 questions during the session. The first one was, how is the government willing to help affordability and access? For example, giving a grant to service providers to increase competition. The second one said, why couldn't we upgrade our existing infrastructure instead of investing in fiber? So answering the first question, Matar Toure from Pura said that the internet has to be treated as a utility, as ISPs are running businesses. Mohammed Fai from the Serekunda Internet Exchange Point, 6B, said that ISPs have very high costs upcountry, but very few clients. And it's easier to reduce costs if they had a lot of clients. He also mentioned that the service providers are charged extremely high taxes, and almost all of their equipment need to be imported. Mamadou Ali Jallo from Moisi also stressed that the government cannot reduce taxes for new ISPs, as that's unrealistic, and said that they are working on a new law which would require service providers to give a percentage of their earnings to local firms. The national broadband he also mentioned that the national broadband is much cheaper than it would have been a few years ago.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I was moderating the digital rights and freedom for express based on revision of the media and communication laws in the Gambia. For the first person we had was Fatimata Jaju from Think Young Women. Fatimata made mention of the declaration of the UN General Declaration for Digital Rights. She made mention of, or she expressed her as a Think Young woman being being there for women, and then she also made mention of what is happening currently in social media in the Gambia, where most of the women are victimized, and also she made mention of the internet access, that it should be affordable, and because taking example of the Gambia, that internet is very expensive now, and then it have to be reliable as well. She made mention of the security, that we should be like our information should be secured and not to be exposed to any other person. She emphasized on the importance of young women in protecting women and in kind of any violence. And looking at the reality, what is happening in the Gambia, she was really emphasizing on how women have been affected, and they're playing a very important role in make sure to protect women's rights. Yes, he continued, the violating of rights, and then women given in what is happening in social media, like the rape cases, and then so on WhatsApp, where people take images of someone's and then just without their consent and start sharing it on social media. She emphasized the importance of women being protected, especially in the social media. She also says that she also says that the laws and the medias have to protect people information, and so that it will not be accessible by anyone, or so that people could be able to do a damage regardless. She was just focusing on, she mentions about how women should be protected when it comes to our information. The internet should be accessible to anyone regardless of where you are. The other speaker we had was Ajirohi from Give One Project. Ajirohi also emphasized on what is happening recently on social media, like about the rape cases, where everyone is just, putting everything on the internet, especially Facebook. She emphasized that the internet should be accessible, and the internet is where people also have access to meet new friends, discuss, and do so many a lot of things. So it should be it should be accessible. It should be regardless of where people are in the Gambia. It should be accessible. She also made mention of like people being criminalized and when it comes to social media, and like that the government have a very big role to play on that. And what is happening recently, like cyberbullying, should be regulated. Everyone should, even though everyone should have access to internet, but not everyone should be just doing whatever they feel like doing on the internet, to damage people's image. Oh. So she made mention of like the internet should be very cheap. We give an example by Senegal that Gambia internet is very expensive. She gave an example whereby 1 meg is like $3 to $5. Looking at the Gambian economical situation, for a Gambian to be spending $3 to $5 for 1 hour, it's really expensive. To give an example, as Senegal, when you have a 1 meg in Senegal, it's really cheaper than coming to the Gambia. So government should really look into that to make sure internet is very cheap, so it can be accessible to everyone in the Gambia. That the government, of course, have a very important role to play when it comes to accessibility and affordability for internet for people in the Gambia. And so Gambia should also learn from other countries what they're doing, not actually to copy and paste, but to make adjustment that suits the Gambian perspective as well. The accessibility, he made mention of it as well, and then privacy online, because he emphasized on that, like give an example about the operators for our data. They said they don't actually know what operators use our data for, and that should be known. They shouldn't just use our personal data that have been given to them to anyhow or to any individual. So I think they said they have to be very clear on what other operators should do with our information. And then there was a point, an example given by Nigeria case as well with regards to data online privacy as well. And they also made mention of why the government, has not yet made any, or there is no amendment on the IC communication or law media, which is not really, it's very vague as of now. So I think government have a very big role to play on making amendment or adjustment of the laws to fit for everyone, not just, protecting like senior officers. For example, she made mention of you cannot be very, sometimes you cannot use very offensive words with any officials because you'll be, you can be taken to court or anything, So I think the law is not really protective for everyone, which means it's biased. So the government have a very role to play whereby they should protect everyone, not only people working in the government. And we had another speaker, which is Ami Ture, on behalf of Pura. Yes, he made mention about the amendment of the IC Act as well. And then she emphasized the role of Pura when it comes to freedom of expressions and the media. And where she made mention of, because of that, Pura have increasingly engaged the stakeholders and then open licensing for over 30 radio stations and then 5 content providers for TV. So that actually shows that Pura is playing a very important role when it comes to freedom of expression by opening the market to other people. I also made emphasis on when it comes to media, people have to be very careful, regardless of the fact that we all have we all have the fundamental right of accessing the internet. But it's important we take mindful of what we do or what we said in the internet, because as of now, the laws are not being protected. Like it's not being, well protected for everyone. So one have to be very mindful of what you said, because once you are caught saying something, especially for officials, the law will just handle the case. And she made mention of the section 138, which is the interceptions of calls from operators and then the monitoring of data or privacy of other people. Like she also emphasized, and then there was she also made mention of like the ICT Act. It's already been recommended for amendment at the National Assembly, and then hopefully they will have to look onto the new changes and then the recommendation that they made. Like she said, making some offensive comments for any officials have a definitely a huge charge for any person being caught regardless. So one have to be very careful of what you do in the internet, regardless of your freedom of expressions in the social media. He also made mention of there is a digital bill draft already, which is not been finalized. So hopefully when everything is done, everything will be very much clear for everyone. Yes, and then, okay, like the regulation to regulate internet, protecting, there is, of course, there is a law, there is a regulation for communication, and she made mention of cybersecurity, things that that the government needs to look onto, speaks about regulation, and then the base for IGF as well. The last person for the panelist was Sekou from GPU. She also emphasized on digital freedom of express when it comes to internet. She said internet is just a piece of infrastructure and just a global group. Some people through the access of the internet should be human right, as he mentioned. He said having access to the internet should be a human right. And they also believe that when you're connected, they also believe that, like some countries, he made mention of in Africa, like not all, like there is no country in Africa that has internet as a human right, has a human right, like internet as a human right. He made mention of like like 7 countries that recognize having to access to internet as a human right. So he emphasized that Africa should also emulate as other countries to make sure in having access to the internet is part of our human rights as well. Yeah, as he said, everyone should have a right of freedom of expression for the internet, have access, and then you shouldn't be prevented of saying anything you feel like saying in the internet, in as much as it doesn't affect anyone. And also, yeah, basically because they just all expresses that digital rights should be, all have agreed that digital rights and freedom should be, should not be limited to any Gambian. So this was that's basically what they discussed during the panel, and there was a comments and then question after that panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we give a wonderful round of applause to our 3 rapporteurs of yesterday? And it's also good, and you'll be seeing them more. They'll be also rapporteuring in the West African Internet Governance Forum. Before we move into the session for today, I don't know if anyone has any questions in regards to the reports in our reports yesterday. If you think any points were missing, because that's why we have a multi-stakeholder process here. If you feel any points were missing in the summary of what they reported on 3 teams yesterday, please feel free to give us a shout out. Where is our mic? Our public speaking mic. Please can someone from our local organizing committee get it standing there, because our session is about to begin. So if you feel that you have any questions, inputs that was not covered, some people had questions to ask yesterday, or inputs that were not covered, please come up, introduce your name, so that for that particular sub-team, the particular rapporteur can take note of it. So when we are drafting our communique, we're able to extract those relevant things. If none of that is happening, if you say yes to go for all the for the 3 presentations, for all the sessions, please, if you say yes, just raise up your hands. Let us see what the yeses are, and then we approve that this particular reporting was okay. So is it a yes to go? Oh, there's a question. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. It's okay. Oh, it's for you, sorry. Yeah, the last point you made mention, like some of African countries didn't rectify the internet as a human right. So I think Segus mentioned that the Gambia didn't rectify it. The Gambia didn't sign for it. So if you can make that changes, that will really help.
Can you speak louder? I'm not getting that one.
You made mention that Segus said from the GPU, the guy from GPU.
Yeah.
He said that some of African countries didn't sign for the internet as a human right.
Okay.
I think he said that the Gambia didn't sign, not actually African countries, some of African countries.
Okay.
So for Gambia to sign is very important
It's
for me
important.
mention and also.
Okay, thank you. Internet.
Any other interventions?
Good morning, panelists. I just want to reference it to Aji Ya Rohim. Yesterday, one of the speakers said that the right that you have here physically should be the same right that you should also have in the digital platform. So if you can be able to also capture the position, it's very important. Thank you.
Okay, so I cannot miss a point that I just noticed, so I will want to clear that up. Amadou Ba from HGD mentioned the digitizing the economy through easy payment system for government workers. He mentioned that there's a new plans in place to phase out the old checks and bank transfers form of payment, and now the organization is now working with other bodies like Central Bank and Payroll Department to ensure people get paid faster, and this includes pensioners and teachers, etc. The whole method was expensive as it requires police escorts for check delivery, but the new process will make things much easier. This will take advantage of the new method. This new method will create transparency and less use of cash. So I think that was a very important topic, and I feel like I missed it, and I should have elaborated more.
Good morning, Buba Efadera. Well, I want to add up something to what the man said. Okay, he also made mention that I am Buba Efadera. Okay, he also made mention that with all these efforts they are doing for them to go online for their financial transaction, but the government lacks cyber experts. Cyber security experts, rather.
Okay. Are we good to go? You have a question? Yeah, please. Once you have a question, just come to the public mic. Then we know you don't have to raise up your hand. Just come to the public mic, please.
Okay, and the other thing, Mr. Ba...
Introduce yourself, sir.
My name is Aliuba. And the other thing Mr. Ba have mentioned of is like trying to create a platform of mobile banking in order to be paying tax and the like.
Are we good to go? So let me get a yes. Please raise up your hands, a yes for the 3 sessions yesterday. Going, going, going. I'm not seeing hands. Going, 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 gone. Thank you very much. So all the 3 sessions yesterday were approved. Thank you, our rapporteurs. Thank you very much. I will now welcome for our session on, it's a big session. It's what has been trending since New Gambia came, which has not really been good in our digital space. We have had a lot of stuff on fake news, hate speech, cyberbullying. Is it retrogressive or progressive? We're going to be talking about community networks, and we have a very good panel here. We have a member from the National Assembly, Halaji Mbu. So please, Halaji Mbu, please, you're welcome to come on stage. I think he's from a member of parliament from Banjul. So we are very happy to have a member from the legislature here. We also have Ya Ami Toure representing the Gambia Bar Association, and the president is not, unfortunately, out of the country. Yeah, thank you very much. So please don't ask questions to Pura today. She's putting her legal hat as a lawyer and a member of the Gambian Bar Association. We also have Hadija Jawara representing the Gambia Press Union. And we have Bakare Njai, President of the Internet Society of the Gambia. Please, Bakare Njai, please welcome. Bakare Njai, please. Yes, you are in this session. Sorry, Bakari, I'm very sorry, please. Welcome to the stage. Sorry for any misunderstanding, sir. And I have my rapporteur, is she here, Umi Kujabi? We only, the only representation we are missing is from the newly formed Gambian Commission, National Commission of Human Rights. We reached out to the chairman, Mr. Emmanuel Juf, and he assured us that he was going to either come or send his executive secretary, Dr. Chen Obari, but unfortunately they are not here. So please bear with us that we don't have anybody from the National Human Rights Commission. Our national chair wants to make a comment.
Yes, good morning, everyone. You'll notice that the internet is terrible this morning. There's actually a general outage. There's a problem at the ACE landing station. So I just wanted to make that announcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Biran. And, you know, this was something Lamin Jabi mentioned in our internet ecosystem yesterday. We have only one submarine cable coming into the country, and that can be a big problem. You know, so once that our backup via Senegal, the satellite backup on the SAT-3 is not, I mean, it's only Gamtel consumers will consume that entirely. So without much ado, I will want to start with our representative from the parliament, because it's very important. When we have people, you don't get most forums whereby we see our representatives from our National Assembly. And these are the people that we elected to serve us in our National Assembly based on the constituency we come from, and they're our voices. And these are the true custodians of our representation and our stake we have in in our governance structure. Within the ambit of Halaji's role in the National Assembly, of course, is to create laws and also feedback from the community and everything. We know a lot of things have been happening within our online space in terms of fake news, in terms of cyberbullying, in terms of data protection and privacy. You know, a lot of people feel their rights were being violated online, either through cyberbullying or fake news. A lot of people feel their privacy too has been violated to some extent. We saw recently ST management team, Brikama Boyo, or as is known, coming out with a press conference regarding what happened with the incidents about physical abuse on his wife, and we had his management coming out saying it's a private business. But what he forgot to mention was that he's a public figure. That's the bottom line. If you're a public figure, there's nothing private about your life. And we have to differentiate, just like Halaji Mbub here is a public figure. If he does something wrong, whether be it in his household, it will come out. Because he's a public figure. We saw what happened recently with Nicki Minaj. She was to go to Jeddah for a concert. The whole of Twitter started shouting. Online, she had a lot of attacks that why are you going to a country that they are violating women's rights, feminists were talking. And then she listened to what everybody has said, and she came out with a statement to say that after studying what is happening in Saudi Arabia, I represent women and everything, I am not going there. Because she's a public figure. She listened to her fans all over the world. So we have to understand when people are talking of privacy and data protection, once you are a public figure, you can either be a sports personality, you can either be a musician, you are a politician, you are no more sitting in your house because you are role models to people. You represent people. You know, so there's a difference when there's an extent where privacy matters. So if people are looking at ST as a role model and they are hearing from his wife, even though she put down the post that I got physically assaulted, people have a reason to question. It's no more a private matter because he's a public figure. He's a music star that people listen to his music. And like yesterday, what happened, Activista cancelled their contract. I don't know whether you people saw it online. His contract was cancelled. He had musicals talking about women and children for the non-governmental organization Activista, and they cancelled it. And this is not, it has happened to a lot of artists around the world. We saw recently Ronaldo, the footballer, Cristiano Ronaldo, was accused of rape. He had to use his lawyers and everything until he was cleared. He had to do that because he's a public figure. He's a football star. We saw the issue, what happened with the endorsement when Rihanna had a problem with her with her boyfriend at the time, Brown, and also he lost a lot of endorsements. You know, so all these are things that we have to understand that when it comes with privacy and data protection, we look at the individual. If you're a public person, Boris Johnson, he's contesting to become the new British Prime Minister. He had an assault. There were people that said he and his girlfriend had alterations in their house. The police went there to investigate until the police came up to say, oh, it was nothing happened, it was some other thing. But he had to come out to be making statements because he's a public figure. So those are some of the discussions we'll be looking at around in this space today. And I will start with our honorable legislator from the House of Assembly, Halaji Mbub. Thank you very much, Halaji. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And I would like to say good morning to everyone. And I'm really honored and privileged to be here to share some information about our country and also the continent at large. My name is Honorable Alhaji Mbow. I'm from Upper Salum. I'm a member or the vice chair of the Committee on ICT, Education and Training in the Gambia. Also, I'm one of the 5 members also representing Gambia in the African Parliament under the AU. Also, I'm in the executive members for the Committee on Infrastructure, Energy, Science and Technology. And I also happen to be one of the few that has been in this industry for some time. Now, I think this is really a very important forum, an important forum where we really need to come together as important stakeholders, because the internet now, somebody just mentioned earlier, there is pretty much very soon nothing that you can do without the internet. And this Internet of Things that is coming up. Now, I think the topic we have here today, I think is really very loaded, because when you talk about cybersecurity, you talk about cyberbullying, you also talk about personal data protection, and I think each one of these one could have been a special topic of its own, but I'll try my best to ensure we really talk about it in as much as the laws and really what we intend to do. Now, I'll start with fake news. You know, when you talk about fake news anywhere in the world, the event of 2006 in the United States come to mind, which is the presidential election, which most people allege that it had an impact on the outcome of the elections. Now, sometimes we also call it zero news. And again, what's happening right now is because of the advent of the internet and also social media that's actually, expanding this fake news. But there are two things we need to bear in mind. That is, one is to insight, and second one is to misinform. Basically, these are the two fundamental things what is actually happening in fake news. Now, the internet and also the social media is actually playing a multiplying effect. And another area that's also playing an effect also is the post-truth politics or post-truth politicians. Really, you have politicians really whose ethics is almost at near zero level. The only thing they do is to be able to get votes, is to come and castigate their own opponent. Spreading news that is really unethical, spreading news that is also a lie, just to gain a fair advantage. And I think that's also the politicians, they are also playing a part in that aspect. Now, in the case of the Gambia, the laws of the Gambia, we have this Communication Act, Information and Communication Act of 2009, which something very funny actually happened in 2013, which brought in some amendments. The amendments basically, well, there are a lot of debate on it, was to protect the government or to protect few officials in the government. And that was amendment that came in where it was prohibited to publish or to publicly, tarnish the image of a public official. In fact, they went further to define what the public official was. Now, a lot of things actually have been said, and a lot of debates during that time until now. There's really a debate that's going on about really freedom of expression relating to this amendment that was made in Parliament in 2013, really criminalizing a lot of the issues that we feel we should have the right to do today, which is freedom of expression. But people also, at the same time, they forgot about our own constitution, which really gives freedom of expression, freedom of association, but our same constitution also is saying that these freedoms also come with a responsibility. It's really very clear in our constitution, which is section 17, subsection 2. Now, for those of us also, we are also part of other parliaments, African parliaments, we are also aware of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Same one also, I think, if I remember correctly, is also section 19, which is also talking about the freedom of association, freedom of expression on civil rights. But it also says the same thing, that there must be also responsibilities on the individual. So for me, it really should be a balancing act. Because if I have the freedom to stand here and then say anything, my opinion about my niece here, I can stand here and say anything about her. It could be good or it could be bad. Now, if it is bad, don't you think she also has the right to be able to for her own privacy? I think she also has the right to do that. So I think these freedoms that we are talking about, I think it's also equally important for us to understand that there must also come with responsibilities with it. We cannot just have a blanket freedom of expression, freedom of action, just like that. Because we must also understand that we also have the other party that also has his fundamental rights that we also need to be guaranteed in the Constitution. Now, the laws that we have relating to the Communication Act, I think they need to be really I don't want to call it change, but I think there's a need for the authorities to understand that time actually has gone. From 2009 until now, you are talking about 10 years. To 2009, when these laws were being enacted, social media was not really the way it is right now. That was 10 years ago. And that's the reason why it's very important for the holistic review of that Communication Act, particularly areas has to deal with the freedom of expression and also personal data protection and especially cybersecurity. And again, I think there's a comprehensive need to look at that one. Now, I will continue further about cybersecurity. Now, you know, with cybersecurity is a real issue around the world. A lot of things are actually happening. People may know it and people don't know it. But in the African context, I will start from African context. Africa actually has the most youthful population in the world. You come to Gambia also, our population is also very youthful. Studies also have shown that this youthfulness actually is also moving more towards the internet, more towards social media. So that means there's a need for us to really prepare ourselves, and that should have been done a long time ago. But if you look at our cyber laws that we actually have, still contained in the Communication Act of 2009, one realizes that they are dealing more towards telecom, more towards how are these calls stored. How do you protect, for example, people that actually register with the GSM. But in terms of your personal data, it really doesn't really say that much in that area. Now, there was we had an event in Addis a few months ago. I think my niece was part of it, where I was asked to talk about cybersecurity and also in the financial industry. I was lucky there because I worked in the financial industry in this country for some time. And back in the US, I worked in the telecom industry, and now I'm in the IT industry and also as a parliamentarian. So I really had some idea about that's what's actually happening. Now, once you look at the statistics about cyber in the African context, in 2015 and 16, there was a survey that was conducted about 20 countries. It was realized that 681 million people were affected by cybersecurity or cyber criminals. And that number translated into $126 billion. The same survey was conducted the following year. This time they take it about also the same number of countries, which is about 20 countries. And what actually happened was they realized that 172 billion were affected. So you're going to see the trend is actually moving up. Now in 2018, Africa itself, our continent, lost more than $3.5 billion in cyber criminality. And yet still our countries, especially Gambia, we do not really have very effective laws that will be able to combat cyber security. Now, at the government level, you will see that you see the user or the customer pointing finger to the provider pointing finger to the regulator pointing finger to the policymaker, and the policymaker pointing finger to the legislator. Where exactly are we? And I think this kind of forum is really very important, where you're going to bring all the stakeholders to sit on a table and see really what we need to do as a country, as far as cybersecurity is concerned. Gambia is no exception. You know, when I was in the finance industry, we do see all these things all the time. But the issue we have in this country is to share information, is to share ideas, and also to share knowledge. It's only very few of us, for example, at the institute I was working, because it's an international institution, where we are also alerted at every single week or every single month about the trending event that is going on as far as cyber is concerned. Then we put policies in place, but that is not at government level. And that's the reason why we are pushing for the African Union. We have a convention called African Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection of 2014, where the countries actually are urged to sign, to ratify, and also to domesticate. Our country, the Gambia, is yet to sign. Even though I'm part of the executive committee at the level of the African Union, at the Pan-African Parliament, but I really do not really say too much in it, knowing that my country actually has not signed. I've pushed at the level here, which I've given the copy to the minister, I've given copy to some of the other members from Moishi to critically look at it. Because if you look at this convention actually, it's really telling you really what you need to do as a country to be able to start from somewhere.
Yeah, thank you. I think I might have to stop you a bit here because of managing our time. Honorable, it's very interesting that the next session just focuses on cybersecurity, and it will also be good if you can stay around for that next session, because it's very interesting what you're mentioning. But I would just want to pass on the floor, because you started with fake news, and we are also looking at Facebook. Those of you who were in our session last year in our National Internet Governance Forum, the policy lady for Facebook, Ikia, who was here, who was talking about Facebook and social media. Facebook have set up a whole electioneering division. So she now works in the electioneering division of Facebook. So they monitor responses on social media and stuff like that. You know, so it just shows how social media has impacted on all those things. And without much ado, I would like to hear from, in terms of the views of Ami Yami Ture, who is representing the Bar Association, on how she sees fake news, cyberbullying, because all these are trends that are emerging today, hate speech within the realms of privacy and data protection. Yami.
Thank you very much, Pons. Good morning once again. So I'll first like to start with data protection, and I'd like to talk a bit about the general principles of data protection regulation. So the general principles are basically the accepted norm, like the international standard when it comes to data protection. And the principles are basically talking about when you collect individuals' personal data, or when it comes to individuals' personal, when it comes to data itself, what should be done in terms of collection, processing, and all of that. And I'll try to compare it currently with what we have with respect to the IC Act. Honorable Mbub has already talked about, obviously, the provisions that we have, or the data protection provisions that we have in relation to the IC Act. But if you look at the general principles, basically they're saying that when you collect, or individuals' data should basically be transparent. So individuals should be told what the data is for. Do you understand? And if you have the principle of lawfulness, transparency, you have the principle of purpose limitation. So if you're collecting data for a specific purpose, it has to be used for only that purpose. You cannot go out. It cannot be used outside of. Let's say, for instance, the GSM collects your data on your ID card or your information, and that is only for SIM registration, and then they decide to use it for marketing purposes. That's a violation of the general principle of data protection. You have principle of data minimization, storage limitation. How long can your data be stored for? How long can your information be stored for, and all of that. But if you look at the principles these principles, like I mentioned, these are just some of the principles, and what we have in the IC Act. I would say, I think in the panel, in the agenda, it says whether our laws are retrogressive and whatnot. What I would say is that our laws are not retrogressive. They are inadequate. They are not addressing the issues that we currently have. Like Honorable mentioned, these laws were enacted in 2009. And currently what we have, imagine the technology or what we had in 2009 and now currently what the technology is. So the proposal, obviously, the idea is that we would have, because laws are not stagnant, they're expected to evolve or change with time. Currently, I know that the ministry worked with stakeholders to come up with a new data protection bill that would sort of address most, if not all, of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of data protection. But we have to be mindful that no matter what laws we enact, like we say, things move. Most of the time, society moves faster than the laws and the policies that we have. So basically, the idea is what is being enacted would also do what is known as, they would try to have a bit of foresight. So not only looking at issues that we are currently dealing with, but with respect to the technological changes and the trends that we currently have, what other issues can come up, and try to address it before we get to that stage. One thing I want us to do in this session, these are things that I just want all of us to sort of go home with and start thinking about. When you talk about cyberbullying and fake news, I think what we need to understand is that there's a difference between having an opinion and also hate speeches, right? You can express your opinion. You can have your opinion. That's why we say freedom of expression. Everybody says, I have a right of freedom of expression, so I can go online and say whatever I want. But we have to also understand, or we have to be mindful that where your right starts, or where your right stops, is where another person's rights starts. Do you understand? So you can have your opinion. I can have my opinion about Hadija, but I cannot go online and say Hadija or defame Hadija in a way that I know it's not true. Because at the end of the day, be mindful, we have laws that will address that. And with respect to cyberbullying, what is the point of going online and try to troll someone or try to make fun of someone? What the problem that we currently have is that I think as a civil society, and I think we need to start working with stakeholders to look at how the government, how we can work with the government to come up with actual policies and regulations to deal with these issues. Because when it comes to issue of cyberbullying, and most recent, we have the issue of what? Revenge porn. So when we talk about revenge porn, it's basically individuals having conversations, or not even conversations. You come about somebody's intimate picture and you decide that the only way you can get back to that person is to spread or share that information. So I get a picture, an intimate picture of somebody. I don't even know the person, but because I want to show my friends that I get information, I share it. You are also participating. You're an accomplice to the crime. So what we need to, obviously social media has mechanisms of dealing with these things, blocking accounts and all of that. But now we need to come up with actual legislations. I think the take home for Honorable now is to go back to Parliament and let them start looking at actual legislations that will deal with these issues. It's not sufficient that we just talk, or when it happens we go online and do all these rants, and all of us the feminists will do all these rants, but we need to go beyond that. We need to have actual concrete legislations that will deal with these issues. Just to go a quick one on data protection. I don't know how many of you have seen the, is it the Face app? The Face app that people have been using. In less than 24 hours, that app was downloaded by what? 80 million users, more than 80 million users all over the world. And then after 24 hours, we come to find out that basically, you know how every time you're logging on or you're downloading something, we just say, I agree, I agree, I agree. We don't read the terms and conditions. But as part of the terms and conditions, basically you're given the app the access to your personal data. The access to use your personal data, and also the unlimited license to use it for whatever they want to use it for. So these are things, yes, we will come up, laws can be enacted and all of that, but also as we have that individual responsibility to make sure that whatever we use, we know what our data is being used for, the purpose, and what we are agreeing to, we know the terms and conditions. Because if you waive your right for protection, then there's nothing that can be done to help you. Just a short one, so I can conclude before, due to time. I think we also need to look at the need to, for the youth, ways and means we can encourage the youths to use the the available broadband. For the past 2 days, we've been talking about how we have this amazing infrastructure, and that this is related to community networks. I just try to touch a bit on most of the items. But then we are talking about how government is talking about how we have this amazing infrastructure and it's not being fully utilized. We have the Universal Service Fund that is provided for by the IC Act, but I think also as a community and as a country, we need to look at ways in which we can encourage youths to sort of make use, or to sort of come up with initiatives that would make use of the available bandwidth so as to provide services to remote areas and to increase access to internet usage. That is the only way we can try to build community networks, because if you want to, sometimes if you want to wait for the government to do these things, it would not be as fast as we need it or as fast as we required. before I conclude, one thing. I think we also need to look at, like I said, these are just questions that I want us to go home with, but I want us to look at how much information is our government entitled to. How much of our personal data or how much of our personal information is our government entitled to? We know that with this new passport, or is it ID card requirement, some of us are required to even go get an Alcalo certificate, a birth certificate, all those documents, all those personal data. Do you understand? We need to know how much information is the government allowed to take from us, and if they're using it, what are they going to use it for? Do you understand? We need to be protected as also citizens of this country. We know, yes, if you don't have it, you will not have a biometric card or you won't have a passport. But we need to also there should be limitations. The powers of the government cannot be absolute. And also we've seen instances where previously governments would force individuals to open their social media accounts in cases or in trials. That's how most people were persecuted. You are arrested and then you are forced as an individual to give them access to your social media account. So I think these are conversations that we need to have and start looking at ways in which we are going to address these or limit these powers that government have in terms of data protection and privacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yami. I think that was articulately done. I think the important bits which she ended with is, personal data is something that it's now a bit, data is the new currency, whether you like it or not. So your personal data means a lot. There are people sitting out there that just need that data for various purposes. So once you know that data is the new currency, we know that we have our parliamentarian here, we know we have to question our governments, and that's why we need this access to information bill to be passed. And I will now pass on to the Gambia Press Union. When we call them the Fourth Estate, we don't call them the Fourth Estate for nothing. They are basically our voices and our mouths, and for Hadija to give us an insight of the issues at hand in this sub-thing. Hadija, over to you. Hello.
Thank you, Pons. Good morning, everyone. I'll be concentrating mostly on fake news for obvious reasons. I work as a journalist and I'm also a freedom of expression advocate. So firstly, Pons and Ms. Honorable Mboof have been talking about fake news, but when it comes to the angle, when it comes to as freedom of expression advocate, we hate the word fake news for obvious reasons. As a journalist, we have a definition for news and a criteria that has to be met for something to be qualified as news. So that's why we find the word very, very problematic, because if you look at news, to us, news cannot be fake. Because one of the main criteria of news is that it has to be based on fact, and this fact has to be verifiable. So when you look at this, and information that has been verified cannot be qualified as fake, because it's based on fact and it has to be verifiable. So that's why when it comes to freedom of expression issues, we said that our news cannot be fake. So we have a problem with the term fake news. So then what can we use when it comes to the issue of fake news? Because now we hear it a lot. And I think in 2018, it was the most searched word in Google because people are confused about the word. So we have two terms. Honorable Mboof mentioned one, misinformation. And then there is also another term called disinformation. When it comes to misinformation, we say that these are the two biggest problems we have in the world now, especially when it comes to social media. Misinformation comes in when you are misinformed. It can be misinformed. Misinformation is not something deliberate. It can be a mistake, and misinformation is given to you by mistake. But when it comes to disinformation, that's why this age is called the age of disinformation. This is when it's done deliberately, when people go out deliberately to disinform you, because and it has an agenda. They want to mislead the public when it comes to issues. So mostly it's done by propaganda machines. You hear a lot about propaganda, and we hear it a lot when it comes to politicians. The two biggest examples are used right now, and these are the ones based on data, is the Brexit and the last US election. when it was done deliberately to disinform the voters. So what happens is that politicians and propaganda machines and trolls farms would go out in, using social media to deliberately disinform the public by one. Their agenda is not for you not to listen to news or whatever, but then their agenda is that you will have access to the information, but then the information will be modded, which means that the information is tampered with, and then you will be left confused what's going on or not understanding the real issues. So you are deliberately being disinformed. So that's what has been going on right now. And most of the time we tend to blame the journalists, but then you will find it very difficult to find this type of information on the mainstream media. But you will find it a lot on Facebook. So people came up with the term fake news media. But then the mainstream media is not the one disinforming you. But you come across a lot of information on social media. You think they are right. You share them, they go viral. But then this is, it has an intention to disinform you so that you're confused. Then at the end, you will make up your own mind and say that, okay, this is the truth, when actually you are being disinformed. So, so what can be done about this? When it comes to freedom of expression issues, we said that, okay, propaganda has been going on for a long time. Propaganda has been here even before mainstream media. Mainstream media started in around when the printing press came in. But then there was, we tend to say that there has been media, there has been journalism and everything. But propaganda has been here since the beginning of time because politicians, even the Rome War, you hear about the fall of Julius Caesar and all those things. What has been done is propaganda. So the politicians always has an edge over the journalists. So what do we say? We say that what can be done right now is that to solve these issues, because we have a problem, and in the media we have to accept that there is a problem. When it comes to issues of news, you will hear another good example, you don't want to leave this behind, is the Myanmar case when the Rohingyas were being murdered and killed and everything. And this is one of the biggest examples of this information campaign against a marginalized group. And then I think one of the topics here we are trying to talk about is hate speech. And this is one thing that can fuel hate speech. Because you are deliberately telling people that, okay, these people are bad, they have been doing this. Because if you look at the Myanmar campaign, the Rohingya campaign, what has been done is that the government, the soldiers were using Facebook. So they will tamper with the image or they will tamper with videos and everything until, okay, the Rohingyas have done this. Before people know what's going on, the Rohingyas were attacked and they are killed by people. And you have the issue with the migrant crisis when they will show pictures, images that they are storming our borders and everything. And people will say, okay, let them go back where they are coming from and everything, and it's wrong. Then you will hear all these images have been paraded on social media. And then they are not verified and they are not fact-checked. So, and that brings us to the solution. What can be done about the issues of disinformation and misinformation currently going on in our world? So that brings us to the most important thing. Journalists cannot be complicit in this because we also have a responsibility to do. But one of the things that brings us back to the issue of fact-checking, to make sure that facts are checked. Even though the social media is faster than the mainstream media, but it helps to check our facts, verify information again, and put it out there so that people counter some of these issues also. And then we talk about issues of regulation. And I think now some of these social media platforms have been forced to self-regulate themselves to bring down certain issues also. And this is some of the campaign we can be. And in Gambia, we may be talking about this. We are not far from this. And I think last year something like this happened when a video went around that this is the video of Solo Sunday when he was being killed. And it was on social media for months. No one was out there to counter that, okay, this is not true. This is not actually Solo Sunday. And the family has to come out to, the daughter has to beg people to stop sharing this information. So these are certain things that can be paraded around. And then I mentioned the issues of regulation, fact-checking. And this is very, very important. And verifying information. But also, what can we also do as a public also? Media literacy is very, very important. We have to understand issues of mainstream media, what's different from it, and what's on social media. How do we, as a person, if we see something before we share it? Because we all have a responsibility. We tend to share things quickly. We see something because the headline is very sensational. We just click and we share without making an effort to verify whether this is true. Sometimes we don't even open the link to read the article or even the fourth paragraph. So it's very, very important also. We have a responsibility. Like I think Yami mentioned issues of revenge porn. You share it, you are also part of it. because you are destroying someone's image. So all these things are very important, and we have to keep in mind when we are doing this, because we are talking about 3 years just now, and we are very close to election. And these are the times where politicians actually can use the so-called fake news to polarize the society. Because if people are divided, it's not in our own interest as citizens, but it's in the interest of the politicians. Because this is what is called political capital. They capitalize on it so that we are divided, we start fighting, we quarrel on Facebook, we nearly kill each other, whatever. But then at the end of the day, because we are so angry and everything, wait, later I will vote, they come and see what I will do and everything. In the end, it's in someone's interest. So to end my message, well, the things I will leave by, it's important that we fact check our information, verify things before we share it, and also to understand more about civil society. We can do media literacy so that people understand the role of mainstream media in a society, and also information sharing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hadija. I think she tried to remove the term fake news, which was made popular by Donald Trump, with misinformation or distorted information, and she covered a lot of things generally in that aspect. And I mean, getting a special, I think one of the hardest, one of the easiest things to do is to click on forward, or to just forward an image, and Yami buttressed that point in revenge porn. You have young people that have been cyber bullied pushed on by their peers to go kill themselves. So we have seen that happening online, you know. So I'm sure the audience will have further questions to ask in regards to how do you say information is verifiable, because we are talking of big data now, the speed in which this information is coming. Some people won't even process the information properly before they click on forward or send. We have a gentleman here, Bakari Njai, president of the Internet Society of the Gambia. If you noticed, within this topic, there's something called community networks. Community networks is one of the big things the Internet Society globally are focusing on. Basically, a community network is whereby you set up a network for a community that they can access information over the internet. So you have, for example, one of the dream community networks I always dream in my head, and I hope one day it happens, is to have all the lumos, whether the lumo is happening in Brikama, whether it's happening in Fatoto, that anytime there's a lumo happening, we have a hotspot there that we can see the traffic between the people coming to buy stuff, the people bringing stuff for Senegal, because there's a lot of traffic. I mean, I've been at a lumo, just looking at the lumo somewhere after Kawu, and just observing the various people, you know. So that place, just having a community network focusing on a market area is important. So it would be good to hear from ISOC their plans and stuff like that in relation to how community networks can help improve our lives. Over to you, Bakari.
Thank you, Pons, for that wonderful intro of community network. Good morning, the audience and my co-panelists. Yes, we have community network on a discussion agenda, but equally we have Internet of Things, which is a very big concern for us at the Internet Society. It's part of our 2019 action plan. So I will talk a little on the community network and the initiatives that we are planning as a chapter, and also move on to Internet of Things, so people can understand what it all entails and what needs to be done. Now, like Pons said about the community network, basically it's about connecting the unconnected. People who do not have access to the internet. Internet Society globally, through its national chapters, is trying to help to extend connectivity to community through the use of TV white space. Okay? Most of the time, these connectivity are very affordable and are expected to be very reliable. Coming to the Gambia here, we don't have any community network as for now, but the chapter is taking it up. Currently, we are working with one of the consultants in Tanzania, who is very popular around in Africa building community networks, and he's giving us his support. And very soon we are going to submit a license letter to the Pura, so Pura can help us with the launching and then we go ahead. We want to connect 20 schools in the West Coast region. All these 20 schools will be connected to the Gambia College, and they will have access to internet, so that the e-learning activities that are going on, they will be able to have access and do their e-learning as required. So basically that is what the chapter is doing as an initiative. Now moving on to Internet of Things, yes, as Gambians, as Africans, we have this idea that privacy is not a very big issue in our community because we live in a communal environment, extended family, and where everybody's door is open to everyone. People can just come in anyhow, anytime in your house. Okay? Yes, traditionally that's how we have been living, and that's true. But then, with the era of internet, we're seeing that privacy is taking another dimension. That is to say, we're living with devices, with gadgets, for example, our mobiles, our wearable watches, like the Apple wearable watch. We're seeing the increased use of surveillance cameras, CCTV cameras around us, and so on and so forth. And all these things are supported by the internet. What they do is, whether you know it or not, they're collecting data, your personal data. And these personal data are sometimes stored somewhere that you and I don't even know. Sitting on somebody's computer, that person is reading about you, knowing a lot about you, right? Now, some of this data might include your health data, your fitness data, your personal, even your location. For example, on your phone, you may put on your location data, location service. Wherever you are, your phone is tracking you. So, who is out there? Who is in control of your data? It's a question that we need to ask. One of the panelists also made mention of the introduction of digital IDs here. Are we aware of our data, where it has been controlled, where it is stored? Do we know our citizens? These are some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Again, when we bought a new phone or a new laptop, or we bought a new software, normally when you want to use the product, you are required to agree to terms and conditions. These terms and conditions, most of the time what happens is the terms and conditions is very, very lengthy, sometimes full of jargons that you and I don't even, we get bored to even read through and understand. What we normally do is we just hit the button and then we accept and go. So what happened is sometimes there are privacy matters that are addressed in there that you as a consumer of that product, when anything happened, you reach out to the legal body, that's the court. At the end of the day, because you haven't read, you don't understand what is part of the terms and conditions, you cannot win your case. So there is this argument over that cybersecurity has done a lot, it has covered privacy and so on and so forth. But then, we at the Internet Society, we're saying cybersecurity is a very big or huge area composed of complex issues. For that being the case, we're focusing on the consumer, okay? And the question is, do we trust the internet as it is today? Especially after hearing all what has been said by my co-panelists here, ranging from fake news, revenge porn, data collection. You don't know where your data is being stored. Do we trust it? So, Internet Society, through its regional body and the global body, has been working extensively to see what can be done. And we're able to come up with an approach which is called trust by design. Trust by design. What trust by design means is that the gadgets that exist, especially in the era of Internet of Things. Now, Internet of Things, if I may define it for you, is that basically you have the Internet. Within the Internet, you have smart devices, for example, sensors. Sensors that can collect data about your environment, that can collect data about yourself. Okay? With the era of Internet of Things, most of our devices would be, of our gadgets at home, our utilities at home. For example, our cooking utilities, our fridges, our TV will be connected through the internet. So I can be here and I put on my fridge in my house through my mobile phone. I can be here and through my phone I can instruct my gas cook to start cooking for me before I arrive at home. We are moving to that level. And what happens if somebody lays hand on all those data that have been, all those gadgets that are connected in my house, the data, what happens to it? It's a question that we need to ask ourselves about, especially if it has to do with health issues. All right? So, privacy by design, here, according to Internet Society, IoT devices will continue to be connected to the internet and collect volumes, big data of us as human beings. Okay? So, as more and more devices are connected, privacy and security would be at risk. The risk would, in fact, increase more and more. So what type of risk are we talking about here? For example, our door can be controlled by a sensor, the door to our houses. The cameras in our houses for security purposes can be controlled by our devices even while we're away. The critical systems, personal property theft, and so on and so forth. People's safety and safety of their family might even be at risk at the end of the day because these devices are collecting a lot of data about us. Large IoT-based attacks such as the Mirai botnet that happened in 2016 have crippled the global access to high-profile internet service for several hours.
Hello, sorry, Bakari, I might have to stop you here. Before we get into midday, we have to go into our coffee break. I think you have really covered majority of the stuff that I expected to do in this presentation. To round up, I would like to thank you. Sorry for interrupting you. I know it's
okay. Let me just conclude.
Okay, please.
With all this fake news, the privacy design, and whatever that we are talking about here, I think as a steering committee for the IGF, we need to go beyond holding this platform, but also engage, having regular talks with the masses in the Gambia about these issues. Because when you look at all what transpired in the internet with regards to fake news, revenge porn, and so on and so forth, self-regulation is very key. And you cannot regulate yourself online when you are not empowered, when you are not educated, when you don't know. How many of us are hitting that button to share information without knowing the repercussion, the extent to which those information are reaching? We don't know. So how can we educate the masses to be empowered to be able to regulate themselves online? Internet is a very complex area. Not only the ISPs can help to control, not only the government. We can have beautiful policies in place, but at the end of the day, the implementation is a problem. Law enforcement alone cannot do it. Legal body, the court alone cannot do it. But the people themselves have a bigger role to play, to be aware of what to share and what not to share. Thank you very much, although I don't have enough time to present all what I need to bring in.
Yeah, thank you. Bakari, thank you. Bear with me, I have to manage my time, and I see people already lining up for questions, so over to questions. Excuse me, one of my colleagues just take this mic. So we just diverge into questions from the participants.
Good morning. I am Abdullah Toure. I have two questions, one for Mr. Mbow and the other one for Mr. Nyai. There was a time I could remember during the Jani commissions. Maybe this question is supposed to be for the cyber section, but I'm not sure if you're going to be here or not. There was a time during the Jani commission when they called this Gamtal guy to do relate to the A's cable and all those things. But there is one of the guy which mentioned that currently our internet, we are running on a plain internet. So which is like one of our lecturers said, Mr. Ba, which is a nation threat to us. That is something that they should not expose on the TV, to mention that the internet is running on a plain internet which doesn't have any fraud detection. So I don't know what was the reaction of the National Assembly to that. And then my other question goes to Mr. Nyai. I know currently there have been a lot of innovation. When you look at yesterday, people are looking individually to their own problem, trying to solve their own problem, like coming up with innovative ideas, like moving away from the cash and in this internet community, trying to get the e-learning system to connect schools. But the problem is that if you don't move back to the baseline and then solve the problem, currently we are all having issue of internet connection, the internet being slow. So I think, I don't know what plans do you guys have, using all of these creative idea, beautiful idea to innovate new things that would develop the country. But I think we should go back to the baseline, try to solve the problem of the internet. Because if you don't have a proper internet, all these ideas you guys are trying to come into will not solve. You will all end up going back again saying the internet was not good, that's why students were not able to connect. And I think we should focus on solving that problem before we come into all these innovative ideas that we are trying to implement. So I don't know which plans do you guys have to solve those problems.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not sure of the answer this Gamta guy was talking about in terms of internet security. But what I can tell you is we have some serious issue in this country in terms of internet security. We have some serious issue. Whether it's in the private sector or whether it's in the public sector, we have some serious issues. However, the ministry actually has come up with an ICT agency bill, which I believe would help to minimize some of these vulnerabilities that we actually have. Now, the bill was presented to Parliament and was referred to my committee, and we have to re-engineer the bill back and make some recommendations. In fact, what they brought to us as a bill, we give them twice that, so that we can ensure that we have better security and some of these vulnerabilities that is kind of reduced. We cannot plainly say we can have a security where there'll be no loopholes. No, that doesn't exist anywhere in this world, but we can reduce some of the vulnerabilities we actually have. And to do that, there needs to be an agency that will take the responsibility, take the bull by the horn to ensure that every institution in this country have a set of standards in terms of security, what you need to do, and somebody else come on top to find out whether you are following up what you need to do or that. And in case you don't, then there will be some penalties for those institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir, I think very important question. What about the constitution before we get into innovation? Now, you need to understand the history of this country, especially where we are from. Dictatorship. And what happened is many institutions that are in them were mostly operating on their own. So we had that challenge and then the struggle. But thank God that with this new dispensation, we are coming together. And then we are hearing what is happening, and now what we need to do as a together and engage the authorities, especially from the submarine cable yesterday, about the challenges that they have. These are some of the things that can come up in our communique today, and then we engage authorities. But then the issue of the community network is in line. Okay, you're talking about schools so that teachers can have professional development opportunities on key areas such as pedagogy. All right, imagine if that is successful, you are able to change the lives of the teachers, and that teachers in turn would change the lives of those children that they are teaching. So that's it's like we are trying to damage control, choose to be innovative in that area. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, I know. But my problem is that, like, still now the issue of the internet is not being solved. So what if those things are implemented now? Teachers are having problem to struggle to connect and then to communicate with their students. So do you guys have any plans like focusing on the A's or the Gamtel, trying to solve those problems first before trying to innovate into these?
As internet community, it's not only internet society, but all the stakeholders within. Before the end of this today, we are going to write a communique, and that communique is going to be shared with relevant authorities, and we'll take up it. All right, follow up and ensure that the internet condition is better now. Okay.
My name is Ayuba. I just want to ask a question to that lady, Hadijatu. As she says that journalists don't know, they believe that there is no fake news. So provided that news passes through the trend of collecting information. So what I want to tell you is that, like, it's not only journalists that give out news. You have people giving out news from different sectors who don't pass through the way of journalism to know how to collect information, how to make sure that they find the authenticity of an information, but they can unsay it. And my belief is that I believe that National Assembly, they should bring laws, very strong laws, pertaining to fake news. Because what I believe is that it's information that we need. If we are misinformed as human beings, we misbehave.
I don't know even how to swallow that information, what you just said. Okay, what I'm trying to say is here, for something to qualify as news, it has to meet certain criteria. And I mentioned two criteria, which is it has to be a fact and it has to be verifiable. And what you are saying is that people sharing information, That is, and I think you said it properly, people sharing information. So that is not news, that is information. So it doesn't, let me come in. It doesn't meet the news criteria. So, and people have, I think Yami mentioned freedom of expression issues, and Honorable also mentioned it. So people, you may, whether we like it or not, people will share their opinion or what they think is going on and everything. And that is their right to do that. And we shouldn't be stopping people from sharing their opinion and everything. For our society to be free, for us to be diverse, and for us to move forward, we have to indulge each other, and we have to appreciate that. Okay? These are very, very important issues. You may not agree with me. Right now, what you are saying, I don't agree with you, but it's your right to say it, and I won't stop you from saying it. Okay? And these are the things we have to, I think Gambia now, we have to move from being tolerant. And to say that National Assembly should pass very, very strict laws when it comes to what you call fake news. You don't know whether you may be the first victim of that, and you may end up in mile 2. Do you wish for that?
It doesn't matter.
That's why when we are saying things like this, we have to be very, very careful. We can say that we put certain measures in place to make sure that we counter certain things. Also, like I said before, self-regulation can be one thing. And also we do media literacy, educate people about certain issues so that they understand. I think the best thing we can do is that we educate people on issues, but not try to send people to jail. It doesn't help anyone. Okay. And when you do that, you cause what we call in freedom of expression, chilling effect. You are forcing people to keep quiet. And when people don't express their feelings, I think we just came away from 22 years of dictatorship. And this forum was not taking place for how many years? The IGF has to be stopped. Now we are here, we are talking about how do we evolve our society when it comes to internet technology. We are having the conversation. And that's a very beautiful thing. We should all celebrate that. So these are the things. So when we are making certain...
No problem. If you want to talk on that, we can spend it. The other question, I have a last question going to the National Assembly member, that after the government realizing all of these cyber threats that are occurring right now, after you realizing, and National Assembly also realizing that these are happening, so what are the things that you put in place to make sure that you safeguard your citizens? And especially those National Assembly members, they are representing the people at the National Assembly. So what are you doing? Make sure, like maybe we will not have the technical know-how to teach everybody how to protect yourself, but what are the measures that you are putting as National Assembly members to make sure that your people are at least safe?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's really very, very, very important question. What we are doing at the level of the National Assembly in terms of cybersecurity or this personal data or this fake news, basically the key thing is sensitization. Because sometimes people spread information, and I think she clearly highlighted the difference between information and news that people really need to understand. Now, sensitization is actually key. But above that, I just mentioned a few minutes ago that the ministry is coming up with an ICT agency bill. And in that bill, there are certain things that we insisted that it has to be there. Number one, which personally I insisted, is like, that agency must have contact with all social media providers so that they can have a damage control mechanism where, in case there is something that is spiraling in the Gambian country or in Africa, they can pinpoint and call somebody and say, you know what, we have an issue, they can take it down as quickly as possible. Now, that's one of the things that we insisted that they have to have, and so that they will be able to contact whoever is responsible. Now, I remember when I met with the Vice President of Facebook for Africa, in a forum, somebody asked, where is this data on Facebook, where is it stored? The lady said she doesn't know. So basically what that tells you is like, as a country, we need to come up with some policies. We need to come with mechanisms where we can help to protect our own data, to protect our citizens. And that's the reason why we think this agency is a right step. But there are more that we need to do to help protect our citizens. But I think the beginning, where we have a proper agency that will be able to handle that, I think is in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. My question is very short. I think it's going to be to you and Yami. It's to do with the data protection policy, the draft one that we're currently looking at in country. I don't really understand the way laws are enacted in Gambia. So if you just indulge me, I want to really, for you to just help me understand how the process actually occurs. So when we finalize this data protection policy, how is that put into law? If it can be put into law. This is layman's question now. So I want to understand, Once we develop the policy, we validate the policy. What does that change? How does that become law, or how does that help us strengthen our data protection laws? We don't have any at the moment, so just that's what I wanted to ask.
Okay. Thank you. Now, laws can be made in various forms. One, it comes from the executive, meaning the president or the minister, they could come up with a particular law and they bring it to National Assembly, verify, vet, ensure this is in the interest of the Gambian people. Once it passes, then it's sent to the president for assent within 30 days. And sometimes the president may have issue with a particular law and he will send it back to the assembly for the assembly to change. But when it's been sent back, then it's going to be followed with a memorandum to explain why he does not want to assent. Now, when parliament verify, they say, you know what, it doesn't really matter. We have the final say. We send it back to him for the final time, and second and the final time. Whether he says yes or he says no, it doesn't matter. It becomes law automatic. Another area is could originate from the National Assembly. Now, the laws that originate direct from the National Assembly is two things. The Constitution is actually saying, if a law is going to emanate from the National Assembly, it must not be a law or an amendment we would charge something on the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Meaning, if this data protection policy that you are talking about, if you give it to me to pass in Parliament, because I can present it as a private member's bill, I can put it in Parliament, we debate it, nothing to do with the government, and then we pass it into law. That means that protection policy that you're talking about must not charge anything on the Consolidated Revenue Fund. But if I know that it's going to have some effect, maybe it's going to involve creating an authority or creating an agency that will actually overlook that, that means I will not be able to bring that particular law in Parliament to pass, which means it has to go through the executive. But if it has nothing to do with the Consolidated Revenue Fund, where an agency and authority will be created, then we can do a private member bill. You can sponsor me, you bring it on board, and then I'll present it to Parliament and it will follow the procedure. And once it's passed, it goes to the President. First time, if he says yes, fine. If he says no, we send it back. We send it back the second time. And second time is final. That means that whether the President likes a particular law or not, the Parliament actually has the final say in our country. Thank you.
Yeah, I think he's explained the legislation aspect. I'll just talk about policy, how also policies are used. Because in terms of most of these things, or in terms of sector issues, there are two ways. They either use law, we have specific legislations, then we have policy. Government comes up with policy. So policy comes from cabinet approval. So let's say take the IC Act for instance. So we have legislation dealing with telecommunication and broadcasting. But in addition to that, we have broadcasting policy. So the broadcasting policy, what it does is that it makes provisions for liberalizing the television sector, how many content providers would have and public signal distributors. So that does not go to, policies don't go to the National Assembly. It goes to the cabinet. The minister responsible will present it to cabinet. And once cabinet approves, they will send it to the agency that is responsible for implementing that particular policy. Then the agency would start implementing according to the policy directives. Is that okay?
Yes, but then how does the data protection become law now? How do we have a data protection law? If policy just remains policy, how does that now evolve into a law?
Yes, so that's why I'm not sure about the policy, but I'm aware that they have drafted a data protection bill. That is the one that's going to the National Assembly. So I'm not sure whether because I'm not privy to exactly what the ministry is doing in terms of that, but I'm not sure whether they're doing both of them together or they try, because if they don't have, let's say there was no data protection bill or drafted data protection bill, what they would have done, what they could have done is once the policy is accepted, because the policy would also outline the things that they would probably want in the bill, and then a drafting process of the Data Protection Act would commence and that would go to. Because the legislation would be heavier and also would have more information than the policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add on that, I'm not privy to what the government is going to come up with as far as to improve the data protection we have in the Act. But what you can also do in the interim, like to engage my committee, which is the Committee on Training, Education and CT, to tell us exactly what your thinking is, what are you thinking along those lines, so that the government one comes in and we can try to harmonize the two, especially when the government one is very weak or where we think yours is stronger, then we can try to harmonize. But again, we have to do that because we don't know when they're going to bring that. We don't have any time frame. Now, to add also, Parliament is changing their policies because the way we work in Parliament is two things. We work based on constitution and we also work based on the standing orders. We actually create our own to regulate ourselves. We are saying that by next session, we're going to change the way we work. We are saying that any regulation which is going to come from any of the government MDAs, ministry, department, agencies, has to be applied by Parliament. Because right now, ministries can go and make their own supplementary legislations or that they call regulation to work in their own issue. We are saying no to that anymore. We are the lawmakers. Is anything that has to do with regulation has to come to Parliament. And that's going to change before the decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ismail, and I'm from North Bank region. My question goes to Mr. Bakari. I saw, he talked about, continuing communities, and then one of the things that he mentioned is, learning and engaging ICT, in education. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, now, according to the IT reports, they have, the Agenda 2030, they want to connect about, 37 or 57, percent of the communities, in the entire world. And now we have reports online which says, more than half of the world population are online. That is a great news, and we all say, big thing for that. But part of this, very small amount are, these developing countries like Gambia. And part of that, the huge amount of those people that are connected in those developing countries like the Gambia are from the urban area. Now, currently we have a huge issue, the digital divides between the rural and the urban sector. Like if I want to learn ICT, I come here. I want to know what is ISOC doing about closing the gap, of the digital divides between the, urban and the rural sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Like, this is a step we are taking. Like I said, community network is one of the initiatives that Internet Society is reaching out to communities to connect them. And we're just beginning. Okay? So for now, like I said, we are interested in connecting 20 schools around the Brikama area because they have an urgent need for now. They have teachers who are on e-learning program. All right? Now, after that process, we are thinking of going forward to the rural areas and start connecting them. All right? So the resources that we have now can cater for the ones that are here for now, but eventually we are going up countries as well. Okay?
Okay, I want to know what's the urgency in the urban areas and that which is not in the rural sectors. Because these are the same kids learning the same curriculums, and we have the same teachers from Gambia, college. What I'm saying is, it could have been, we have, you have, urgencies over there. It could have been divide and balance, whereby you can close these digital divides between the rural and the urban sectors. We in the rural sectors are finding it very difficult, to cope with such,
we are saying, not that it's finalized, we are in the process. It might happen, it might not happen. Because it's like we are applying funding, out there the whole world is also competing for. And what happened here is that we start at an advantage. Okay? What happened here is we start at an advantage because last month I was in Ethiopia And the ISOC regional office of Africa contacted me that they definitely want to focus on African English speaking countries, especially Gambia and Nigeria, for these community networks, if we can apply. And I said, yes, we have an opportunity to help our communities connect them. So Nigeria just got their own, and Gambia in the process. So when I came up with the idea, I realized Commonwealth is helping teachers, and they are piloting the project. So it would be better to connect those schools and support the teachers. But Commonwealth wants to extend. Possibly in the next phases, we can start following Commonwealth schools. But what will happen here is that if the schools are connected, you, the community, can also get your connection from that. But the target are the schools. So, for example, if it's so that a school is connected to itself, all the commands around that school can have access to the internet.
Yes, like I think Mr. Pons, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 3 years or 4 years ago, we have this project in the Gambia called Connect School, Connect Community. And in my region, I have done a survey, personal survey, on those communities connected. And schools are, those are in the schools. You have Kerawan, if I'm wrong, and then you have SL. Now, I'm telling you this, just last week, Saturday, I was in Kerawan and SL. These computer labs don't have internet connection for the past 2 years, probably. Do you get it? Now, if you are saying, there is agency in the urban areas, in the schools, how about the rural sector? This is first-hand information that I achieve, by going there by myself. So I'm just recommending next time when you guys are having, you consider the rural sectors too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Pons, can I just ask something? Now, myself, I'm an educationist, and I have passion to ensure that every school in this country is connected. Maybe you may not know me, but some of your colleagues might know me. When I was at university, I worked with the Student IT Association to go around to map all the computer schools that have computer and see how we can connect. It was funded by Pura, we have but we are resource, that's the problem. All right? So gradually we'll get there. Gradually we'll get there. So let's be optimistic. Huh? Thank you.
I have a question. My question is going to Mr. Bo and Amiture. I want you people to dilate more on section 17 and subsection 2 that talks about rights should be with responsibilities. So I want you to just dilate more on that area. Thank you, sir.
You mean of the 1997 Constitution?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I think it's just talking about the fundamental human right. Now, this section basically was saying that every person in the Gambia, you see, it's very clear, in the Gambia, it doesn't matter whether you are male or not. Every person in the Gambia, regardless of your race, your political affiliation, your origin, your sex, whatever, shall be guaranteed fundamental rights. Then, if you continue on subsection 2 of the same, it's telling you also those rights they must understand must come with responsibilities. And it's saying that those responsibilities, the government may come in where they think it's a national security issue to put certain things in place. What it means actually is, even though you may have the right to say what you want to say as freedom of expression, you must understand that your colleague also has a right to his privacy. You know what I mean? Because whatever you say or whatever you publish could be very detrimental to him, because it could also become as defamation on his side. But to you, he said, okay, it's my right to say what I want to say. But those rights must have limitations because of your other colleague or the other person who is also in this country. Because they also have right to certain privacy, they also have certain rights in terms of protection. Basically, that's what he's saying.
Thank you very much. We have to give a round of applause to our wonderful panel. I do, and for those of you, one thing we don't do, when I still believe in this concept of developing concept, we talked about New Gambia, why, what has changed, what has not changed. But one thing, when you see a parliamentarian like Alajumbu you know that we have hope in this country. Because we knew the kind of parliamentarians we had before. So I would expect all of you to lobby him. He is in the Committee of ICT and Training. They are our members. Lobby him for things you want to see that can improve us. Visit the National Assembly. So thank you for this wonderful panel, and it's now coffee break. We'll see you in the next session. Have a nice day. It's 10 minutes for coffee, 10 minutes coffee.